Yeah,
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So present. Yes, standard. Okay. So hello everyone. Welcome to this workshop. It's an intro to UI and UX with Figma and Canva. Basically we're going to be going over like graphic design stuff and like how you can use those tools to help you. Okay, so originally we planned this a little differently. I'm not sure if we're going to like do the full thing. But originally what I was imagining this to be was that we'd have like a slideshow presentation, like Q&As in between. Like we were supposed to have like 2 Q&A sessions, and then we'd have like a Canva demo and a Figma demo. And then we have like anyone who's like in the workshop who would kind of like go on either Figma or Canva and then make something on that. But I'm not sure how long the slideshow is going to take. So if it's kind of short, we can either do just like one, like either Canva or Figma, and then like a user demo. But yeah. Okay, so about me. Well, I'm Amanda, and I'm a 16-year-old UI UX enthusiast. I really got inspired to pursue graphic design like in quarantine. So before that, I kind of like learned how to make like aesthetics and video edits, kind of with like friends online. And that was like really fun. But I think during the pandemic, I was like so bored. So I went on Instagram and I started scrolling through my feed. And that's how I saw like a lot of like the cool accounts that have like really cool feeds. Like if you see like Generations or organizations like that, their feeds are just super well run, and the people who run the social media accounts, they really put a lot of effort into that. And just seeing like what they're doing and what a lot of other people are doing, like superposition, that really inspired me to learn graphic design myself. And I self-taught myself on Canva and Figma. And I am also a director of outreach at Hack3, which is an organization that like hosts hackathons to provide marginalized communities with exposure to computer science and education. And I also have past experience creating posts for nonprofits. So I know a couple of skills. I know UI UX, graphic design, and wireframing. So this kind of ties into what we're going to go over today. For UI UX, why are some images easier on the eyes than others? For graphic design, how do you design posts that attract attention? And for wireframing, what tools are used to lay out websites before they're built? So here's how I learned like UI UX, graphic design, visual principles. So I first started out with graphic design after seeing like what was on Instagram. I actually took posts that were already on Instagram and I basically like redesigned them on my own Canva. And I basically like taught myself by like copying over the posts, except kind of like making them mine. And I would like observe like how the shapes were, like how the post was structured, and like what information you needed to communicate and get across. And so that's how I learned Canva. A small little hack that might help you who want to learn Canva. Originally, I had the free version of Canva, but if you want to get the premium version for free and you don't want to pay anything, what you would want to do is if you work at like a nonprofit or some kind of like educational institution and you're using Canva for that, you'd want to apply as like kind of like a nonprofit thing, and kind of like apply like as nonprofit status, because they have like a free version for premium for people who are like students and stuff, which is super cool. And after that, I moved on to UI UX. I was kind of learning UI UX while I was learning graphic design, but really, as you kind of like expose yourself, you get a feel for like what's better, and what works out more and draws more attention. And you kind of like get a feel for those design principles, which we'll be going over a little later. Um, and then after that, I taught myself Figma. I actually got exposure to Figma a couple of years earlier, but I didn't know much about it. I did design like a website back then. And then just coming back to Figma, I realized that, you know, you don't have to just like create websites on it. You can also like create like graphic design and like various different things. And that's how I kind of like learned wireframing on Figma. Okay, so now we're going to go over what good design looks like. And for anyone who kind of like came into the workshop a little later, welcome. We're going to be talking about visual elements. So for design principles, at least there's 4 that we're going to go over today. The first one is color. So whatever you do needs to be pretty unique. People are drawn to very dramatic colors. They're drawn to things that stand out. Even if you just have like simple monochrome colors like black or white, that's okay as long as you add a little flair. You want to be like very dramatic. You want to put your own touch on it. Number 2 is simplicity. Don't overcomplicate what you make. I've seen posts where if they had like a little less elements, they would look super good. Like what you want to do is you want to have a couple of elements and you want to drive it home. You really want to make those few elements stand out and you want to keep a good balance. 3 is order. Which element is the most important? You really want to place priority on making the most important elements stand out while having less important elements kind of be in the background, but still add to the post. And the 4th one is pattern. If you just put everything on screen, it's probably not going to make sense. So you really want to figure out like really what is my priority, what do I want to stand out the most, and then really put the most emphasis on that, whether that's by bolding it or making it big enough to stand out on screen. And also for patterns, you want to create some sort of repetition because repetition is pleasing to the eye. Okay, so I put in some examples of like past graphic designs that I've created. So based on what we've talked about so far, does anyone want to unmute their mic or put in chat what makes this like a good design?
For me, the first thing that stood out was that it's the amount of words and text on the page are very minimal. It's not very cluttered, so it's easy on the eyes.
Yeah. So you're right about that. I guess that's like one thing. Does anyone have any other thoughts?
Sort of the color scheme.
The color scheme. Yep. Okay, I see Gayatri. Is she said the font and the color themes, and also the little graphics to the side. Yeah. So basically, it's like everything that you guys said. You guys like really nailed it. So really about this post, the first thing that draws your eye is like the text, beta version release. This was for kind of like a project slash startup that I'm working on. But immediately when you see that text, you know what this post is about. And then you can also see the text stands out which is probably the most important thing. You want it to stand out so that people can understand what is being communicated. And the graphics like do also add to it, but what they also do is, even though the graphics are kind of in the background, they draw the user's eye in. And since the graphics are surrounding the most important part of the information, the user's eye is also drawn to that information. And the colors have like a very pleasing balance. Like I think we might touch upon this like later, but some colors, when you put them together, they have like a very pleasing aesthetic. And so if you go online and if you look at like the color wheel or any other like thing related to color theory, you'll really like get a feel for which colors go together more than others. Okay, cool. So I think we can move on to the next example. This was for a team project that I was working on with my friends. But I guess we can do the same thing as we just did and share thoughts on like what makes this like a good design.
It's sort of minimalistic, yet looks kind of pretty.
Yep. So there isn't like too many elements on screen. Let's see, let's check chat. Okay. Yep, user friendly. Like anyone who's looking at this site can tell what it's about. And like the most important text is like bolded and it's made bigger. And there's like also like a download button. Yep. So this was for like a genomics project that like my team and I were kind of doing. It was like basically like based around this like issue of like, you know, when you take like a 23andMe test or something and you kind of like upload your genomic data to figure out like, oh, what percentage of ancestry am I? And sometimes those companies take that data and they end up selling it to like third parties without the user knowing. And so we decided to create something that would kind of like help people to like keep it secure. So that was like basically what was behind this. It was like a pretty cool thing to work on. Okay, so I kind of just created this post like on the spot last week. But since we've gone over 2 examples of good design, what makes this a bad design? Yep, font is odd, not much info. The colors don't look great together. Yeah, I would like definitely agree with that. Patterns in the background are sort of hectic. Yeah, like the lines are like very stressful to look at, right? And I like the graphic though, it's super cute. Thank you. Yeah, the graphic is kind of adorable. Oh, oops. Yeah, so I think really what would make this better is like improving how the text looks and um, maybe making like a more pleasing color scheme, as a couple of you said. Because like the lines do look awkward, and also the black clashing with the green also looks kind of awkward, which is another example of like color theory and how you can improve that. And you'll notice that perhaps having something like a bit more like smooth would make this like better. But yeah, super cool. All right, I guess we can move on. So I made this thing called like breaking down UI and UX, and it's basically everything you need to take in mind when you're creating like a post or something related to graphic design. So you need to think about 4 things: needs, perspective, hierarchy, and consistency. So for needs, the questions you want to be asking yourself are, what do you want to highlight with your design? Which information do you need to show? And it's basically like, what do you want to communicate to your audience? Next thing, perspective, is who are you serving? How will your design fit into their story and support it? And perspective is something that's very important. It's probably tying into um, mostly everything in graphic design. You want to know like who your audience is, and like where they're coming from, so that you can understand like what does my audience like, and also what do they want, what do they need, and how can I kind of like communicate this to them in a way that they can understand. We'll be going over this more in the presentation. And another thing to keep in mind is hierarchy. Which order are your elements going to be in, and which elements are more important than others? You want to keep in mind like first priority, second priority, elements that you can leave in the background. So that's what I mean by hierarchy. And lastly, consistency. Where are you in the design process? Have you started out, or have you already created a pattern? When you're first starting out, you might want to take things a bit slower and start getting familiar with design principles and using the tools, and like getting a feel for it before you actually like develop a style that you're comfortable with. And then you kind of like use that style again and build upon it. So needs, perspective, hierarchy, and consistency. Keep those in mind. So since we went through quite a bit of the presentation so far, does anyone have any questions right now? Feel free to unmute or put in chat. Okay. Okay. I understand UI, but what do you do on the UX side? Say if you were to do this professionally. Okay, so that's a good question. So, like your job. What do you mean by job? Like, are you asking like the difference between UI and UX? Oh, okay. So if you were a UI/UX designer at a company, like what does user research consist of? No worries. Okay. So trying to imagine like where you're coming from. I would imagine that if you are trying to like understand the user's perspective in UX, since like UI is basically user interface. So like, what does it look like to your eyes? And then UX is like user experience. How does the user feel when they're using or looking at what you created? So user research would kind of be focusing more on the UX, which you touch upon there. So that would be just like asking, like, or rather not asking, but trying to like understand your user's perspective. And usually for user research, the best way to kind of like understand your user's perspective is by engaging with them directly. So I know a lot of people could do like cold emails or like reach out to people online. But really in past experience, what I found is the best way is to like set up like a meeting with people one-on-one, and kind of like ask them how they feel about the design and what is their experience. and like what is their like perspective as someone like looking at the design, and is it communicated to them in a way that they understand or that they like. So that's basically user research. A lot of people have like different methods for user research, but typically like the best way to research your user is just to engage with them. Any other questions, or does that answer your question? Can you explain the difference between UI and UX? Sure. So I believe we kind of touched upon this earlier, but UI is user interface. It's how does like what you're looking at, what does it look like? Like what elements are there, what text is there, and how is it laid out in front of you? So that's UI, right? And then UX is the user experience. So it's like, how does the user feel when they're looking at or engaging with what you've built? And what's their perspective as someone who is like engaging with what you've made? And what do they think about it? Okay, yeah. So sadly, we have to kind of cut Q&A short for this time, just to like get through the rest of the presentation. Okay, cool. So something to remember, who matters the most is your audience. When you're really doing anything with UI UX, you have to keep in mind the perspective of your audience. And who is your audience? So something you can do to kind of like get a feel for who they are is to build a user profile. So this is like the most average user who engages the most often with what you've made. So it could be an 80-year-old man who lives in Pasadena, California. It could be a 27-year-old woman who lives in Florida. Just thinking about age, gender, location, in some cases ethnicity, when you're building out a user profile so that you can understand better your users' needs, their perspective, and their interests. And yeah. So audience-centered design. So when you're making anything, you want to think of who you're making it for. Think from the perspective of the people you're trying to reach. What are their needs? Where are their interests? And how can you communicate with them in an engaging way? So really, this is probably like the most important part of UI UX. You want to create people-centered design. And we kind of went over this earlier, but if you don't understand where your users are coming from, that's totally okay, because not everyone can know everything. Talking to people is the best way to gain perspective. And if you don't know where to reach your audience, typically some of the best ways are to use social media or something online. So you can use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. In some cases, you can even use like a more personalized way, like Discord servers or something like that. It really depends on like the demographics of your audience and where you can find them online like the most. And don't be afraid to DM people on any of these social media apps and ask if they're down for a 10-minute one-on-one coffee chat. Usually if you make it quick, people are really willing to share their perspective. And don't expect like everyone to like suddenly like respond to your DM. Usually it takes like at least like reaching out to a dozen people before you get a response. And even if you don't get a response on the first time, that's totally okay. Just keep being persistent and keep trying to reach out to people, because I guarantee you, if you keep making that effort, then at least one person will respond, and that one person is very valuable. And be bold with colors. So don't be afraid to experiment. With UI UX, the possibilities are endless. The sky's the limit, and discover what you love. Okay, so I included a little section on logos. So in UI UX, it's not just about like posts and stuff. You can also make like specialized like graphics, such as logos for companies. So where can you make logos? You can really make them on like Canva and Figma, or anywhere that has like a graphic design software. If you want to find like icons for logos, you can easily go on flaticon.com and kind of combine a few graphics or modify them. And more advanced designs can be made on Adobe Photoshop, which is kind of like a step above Canva and Figma. This is where you can do like digital art or kind of like custom made graphics. And something to keep in mind when you're making these are contrast. So contrast is like how much do the colors clash? So you can have colors that are kind of light. Light designs are what most people use. Most are pleasant and bright. So it's kind of like white, like yellow kind of colors on the lighter end. And then you have darker colors like black, brown, etc. Darker colors are bold and clashing. Dark designs draw the user in, and they're usually used to make a statement. And again, even for multiple different colors, like you can have like a darker yellow or a lighter brown. There's a lot of like shades. Okay, so summary, what to focus on. You want to focus on your audience, perspective, tools, patterns, and contrast. So it says this meeting will end in 10 minutes. Okay, are we good to go on time, or do we need to kind of like wrap it up soon? Udichi, are we good on time? Okay, so I think we can like definitely wrap it up by the meeting limit. But in the meantime, does anyone have any questions? Okay, Gayatri says none. Okay, I think nobody else has any questions. We can probably move on. Okay, cool. So basic run through. So originally I wanted to teach you guys a little bit about Canva and Figma hands-on. So I wanted to teach you guys like which features these tools have and where they are. And by the end, you know how to like leverage them for your own passions. So I'm not sure if we would have time to do that, but considering like the time limit, if you want, you could use like a site like Dribble for inspiration, and that's Dribble with 3 B's. So you can find like sites with like different mockups and stuff on them. Okay, so it does look like our meeting is going to end in 7 minutes. Okay. So really there's 2 ways we could go from here. So we could either do like a short demonstration of Figma or Canva, or we could just end the meeting early. Do you guys like have any preferences on that? Does anyone have to go early? Okay, cool. So some people are saying would prefer like a short demonstration of Figma. Okay, so I'm actually gonna like wrap up the presentation, and then I will like show like a short demonstration of Figma. So thank you all for coming. And at the end, here's kind of my contact information. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or my email address. And here's also my personal website with kind of like a little screenshot of that. All right, cool. So I'm going to open up Figma. Figma.com. Okay, cool. Let's see. So you can create like a new file. Cool. So this UI UX workshop, here's where you can title things. Okay, so for Figma, there's like a lot of different things you can do. Kind of try to poke around. So you can see on the left-hand side, here's where kind of like all of your assets are going to be listed. So all of your elements are going to be on the left, and on the right is like where you can change the color or like the shape of things. And you have design, which is like how you can change the design. Prototype is if you really want to make a mockup. And inspect, you can see like the CSS and different properties. Yeah. So, okay, that would actually be a good idea. So, I guess I can kind of show like a short mockup that I made in the past. So this one is called Vanessify. So it's like a project that I made with a couple of my friends, including UDT. Shout out to you. So Vanessify was basically an app meant to help users optimize their day by kind of like custom curating a schedule based on an AI algorithm. And so as you can see like a fuller display of elements to the left. So there are a lot of elements. This was like over the course of a couple months. And to the right, you can more so see like design, prototype, and inspect. So if you can kind of zoom in, which is in the top right-hand corner, you can type in something like 50%. You can see like different like mockups and elements, and this is where you can see kind of like the app and the layout. So as you kind of like zoom in, you can see that there's like multiple different elements. So this right here, this text is one element. So if you want to create a new text box, you click in the top left-hand corner on text and you create one. And then you can type in like hello world. This is very small. So what you want to do, you want to go to the right and change the font size. And you can also change it to non-italic, italic, and bold, and etc. And that's how you can make text. You can also create a shape by going to the top left-hand corner. So you can make different types of things. You can place an image, you can make a star, a polygon, circle, line, arrow, or rectangle. But for now, I think we'll just put rectangle. So this is what you can do. You can like create a shape by kind of dragging it. You can also adjust the size by shrinking it or growing it. You can make it shorter or taller or kind of like thinner. And you can also adjust the color. So you can make it orange. And the best thing about this is that they give you like a color wheel so that you can adjust the color to whatever you want. And you can also change the opacity to kind of make it like more translucent or like opaque. You can also adjust like the position here. So if you want to adjust the X coordinate and also the Y coordinate. And you can also like manually change like the width and the height, which is pretty cool. And if you add a stroke and you change the thickness, you can see that it adds like kind of a border around it, which is also pretty cool. And you can also make things into a frame so that if you like add an element into it, it goes into the frame. And that's what you can see. Yep. And if we also change this color, you can see that you have cool couple of rectangles here. But that's mainly our final demonstration of Figma. Since there's less than a minute, I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming to this workshop. And this was like pretty cool. If you guys have any questions about Figma, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or like email me or DM me, whatever works for you. And yeah, this was super cool. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. This was amazing. I think I can end the meeting now.